Welcome to another episode of Simon Says, where facts come first. I'm your host, Jenny Simon. Today we have a special guest, and so grab your popcorn and your drink right away. We're going to take a quick break and come back with her. After we finish to interview the guest, then we'll have some updates from previous shows. So grab your drink, grab your popcorn, and we'll come right back to you. Thank you for tuning in to Simon Says. To ensure that you never miss an episode, click subscribe and make sure to turn on the notifications by clicking on the notification bell icon. See you at the next episode. Welcome back. Now today joining us on Simon Says is Miss Rosemary Rajan, a naturalized Grenadian, came to Grenada since she was 3 years old. And the only time she left was to further her education, and she was right back in Grenada. She's more Grenadian than probably me. But we are pleased to have her today. She's here today to tell us a true story. Now, she was put out of the ministerial complex, not even allowed to stand on the pavement outside of the complex. Rosemary, welcome to Simon Says. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you must welcome. You must welcome. Simon Says is the people's program. So, so we accommodate everyone. So, Ms. Wadsworth, let us get right to it. Take us through that day, the morning of the 20th of July, 2023.
Good. So I showed up at work as usual, and my boss requested that I attend a meeting in her place, a meeting that I had scheduled. The meeting was scheduled in her name. I showed up at the ministerial complex as usual. I had not been in the ministerial complex since the last general election. I'd like to reiterate that because I think somebody's trying to have some inaccurate information being put out there that I was there previously under the current administration. I was not in the ministerial complex since the last general elections until that day last year. So I showed up, went to reception downstairs, stated why I was there and which section I needed to go to. I cleared security and I went up to the third floor, the Ministry of Agriculture. I introduced myself to the secretary. She was trying to be a little difficult. She was trying to suggest that the person whose name the meeting was in should be the one attending the meeting, my boss. And I did ask her, as a professional, if she wanted proof that I worked with the company, that my boss had authorized me to be at the meeting. My boss was right in the parking lot. But the secretary to the director of land, she changed her mind. She told me to have a seat and wait. While I was waiting, I was chatting with a gentleman who introduced himself as an employee there. And an officer dressed in uniform came up to me. So I was sitting, the officer approached me, standing in front of me. He was wearing a black COVID mask. And the first thing he says to me is, do you know you're not allowed to be here? It was an extremely bizarre question, and I answered it to the best of my ability, being very shocked, of course. So I said to him, well, I do not know that I'm not allowed to be here. Are you telling me that I'm not allowed to be here? And he answered yes. At that point, I thought he mixed me up with somebody. I couldn't imagine what this was about. And I, of course, asked him for details, which he refused to provide. He did introduce himself. He gave me his name, his badge number. He said which police station he was from. But all he said is that I am not allowed to be here, and he has been sent to escort me out. Of course, I asked him who sent. Sorry, go ahead. He was from Central Police Station. Central Police Station, he said. So I asked him for details. Firstly, to clarify his statement that I am not allowed to be there. I pointed out to him that I didn't break in through the window or any such thing. So I was clearly allowed by the security to come up here. Him saying that I'm not allowed isn't sensible or factual. He refused to provide an explanation in terms of who sent him to escort me out. He also refused to answer that question. He kept repeating like a broken record that I needed to leave and I was being difficult. That's all he kept saying in response to my questions on whose orders he's carrying out to escort me out of the ministerial complex, because I have never had such an experience in the ministerial complex ever. You know, so I was clear. I was definitely looking for an explanation. Meanwhile, because he refused to provide an explanation and everybody around was looking on, they didn't seem to have any work to do. I contacted Miss McDonald, Janelle McDonald from GBN. I had her cell phone number because I had spoken to her a couple of days ago. It was work related. So I had her number and I contacted her and I informed her about what was happening right then. She did express surprise. She was wondering if I was in violation of the dress code. And she agreed that it was newsworthy. I wanted the camera crew over right then to record what was happening. And during that conversation, while I was on the phone, the officer picked up my handbag and my folder that was on the chair next to me without
He
asking
picked
my
up your
permission.
he picked up your handbag.
Yeah,
Oh
he
my.
helped himself to my belongings without asking permission or anything. And I have never seen police officers carry out their duties in such a manner. I've had police officers behave somewhat inappropriately in the past, and I was able to explain to them that this is not the protocol they should be following, and they have listened. But this was the first time I encountered a police officer who had no respect for law and order, essentially. So he picked up my handbag and my folder. At that point, I told him, do not touch my belongings, hand them over, I will walk out, because this is getting a little out of hand. But meanwhile, I did explain to him, right, that he needed to tell me what crime I was committing and why I
Right.
needed to leave, who ordered him to tell me that I needed to leave, and he refused to provide answers to these questions. He saw the questions as me being difficult and not doing as he said, because he felt his job was just to command me to do as he says, right? Um, what upset me the most was that the gentleman then held me by the arm. Um, he held me by the arm, and the first thing I said to him obviously was, "Don't touch me." I've never had an officer just hold me by the arm or anything
Yeah.
like that.
You,
So
you you were not on the arrest.
I was not. And I even suggested to him that if I am committing a crime, I would prefer that he handcuff me rather than hold onto my arm with his hand, in terms of following police protocol. Since when do officers grab people by the arm? And he refused. He totally refused. I told him he could handcuff me, but I still think he needs to state what crime I'm committing and for what reason I need to leave, because this is making no sense to me. Here I am to attend the meeting. It's part of my duties for the job. How do I just refuse to carry out my job because he chooses to carry out his in a rather unprofessional manner? The
Um,
officer, it's like he was deaf.
Rosemary, Rosemary, can you is it okay for you to tell us what the meeting was about?
Sure. So I was there for a meeting with the director of lands. I had spoken to his secretary on the phone, and she requested that someone come in on that specific day between 9 and 12. I had
Okay.
contacted the Ministry of Agriculture to inquire about the availability of government land for lease in or around Grandlands for the business. So
Right.
I asked that question on the phone, and instead of answering it on the phone, they asked for somebody from the business to attend the meeting with the director of lands. And when I first made this inquiry, they were trying to deny that government land does exist or that they know where it is. And I had to point out to them that that is very ridiculous because land use maps of Grenada do exist. You know,
Right.
if they haven't seen them, it's because they're not doing their job. Even if the staff of the entire ministerial complex has changed, I'm pretty sure the maps are there somewhere. I had begun the
Right.
process of asking about government land at the NDC office in Hippos Complex in Grand Mall, and the
Mhm.
secretary there tried to tell me that they have no records of anything because the previous administration left things in such a state. And I said to her, that's nonsense. I refuse to accept this as an excuse because when
Mhm.
said party was campaigning, said party did not say they don't have a plan. They said they know what to do. So for you
Right.
now to tell me that you do not have a list of government land and it cannot be obtained because of mismanagement by the previous administration is just absolute rubbish. I refuse to accept that explanation. So, because I know that land use maps of Grenada exist, even if they want to say they don't necessarily have a list of government land, I contacted the Ministry of Agriculture and I pointed that out to them that you do have what you need to identify government land that is available in Granads. So that's why I spoke to the Director of Lands and they asked for me to come in rather than simply look for the information and pass it on. I think they were trying to create unnecessary procedures.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead now.
Yeah, so at that point, the officer was holding me by the arm, which I was very uncomfortable with, and more so because I told him, "Don't touch me." I reminded him that he could handcuff me, and he refused to do any of those things. He just held me by the arm. I did begin to leave, but of course, I should not have to leave because I'm being harassed. You know, especially by an officer on duty.
Mhm.
I needed a proper explanation. And I was still on the phone with Janelle from GBN. She was asking that I record the incident or I at least take a photo of the officer because he was already violating me by holding on to my arm, even after I told him not to touch me. I didn't wish for it to escalate. You know, I didn't wake up that morning prepared to have to defend myself from a police officer holding me by the arm. You know, it was not something I was prepared to deal with. So I asked him very politely if I can record his face or take a picture, and he said no, and I left it at that because I did not wish to be further harmed physically. I mean that is what you call inappropriate touch. For a human being to say "don't touch me" and you insist on holding that person's arm, that is just perverted. And I said that to him, and I said that to Janelle on the phone that this officer is rather perverted. You know, he has the opportunity to handcuff me. I'm not denying him that right, and he insists on instead holding me by the arm. And that is the only thing that got me out to the building, just the discomforts of having this gentleman holding on to my arm. I walked a bit, I stopped, I stood up for my rights. He held me by the arm again, and that is how I left the building, just because he insisted on holding on to my arm every time I stopped walking. And
Wow.
by then, everybody was looking on from the third floor to the ground floor. That is how it went. With me walking a bit, stopping, then he holds me by the arm. Then I yell, "Don't touch me!" He refuses to let go. It was disgusting. It was just very disgusting. We got downstairs. We got to the doorway. He escorted me out with his hand on my arm, and he was extremely unprofessional. When we got to the front, he told me, "You are not allowed to stand here. You need to go stand in the road area. Like this pavement is off limits for you. You know." And here I am, a citizen of the country, and I'm wondering what on earth is going on, you know, because I've never received any type of treatment anywhere close to this in the ministerial complex or anywhere in Grenada for that matter. You know, so
Mhm.
I wanted to know what had changed and why I was not informed that I had this status in the country of not being allowed certain places. And primarily, how do I explain to my boss that I am not attending this meeting since the officer refused to provide an explanation? Um, so that was essentially what happened that day. I left. and I have not been back in the compound of the ministerial complex since. I have inquired as to what triggered the incident, what's the explanation, where else am I not allowed to be, since when am I
Mhm.
not allowed, how am I not allowed, were laws passed. I haven't really gotten any sensible answers from the government or from the senior ranks of the RGPF.
So, have you had a criminal background? I mean, have you ever been arrested here in Grenada, outside
No,
of Grenada?
no, I got my police record as recently as late last year for employment purposes, and there was nothing on it. Even following that incident around early November, I started a job that required my police record, and I had even thought that that incident would have been on it. And I had told my boss at the time that this incident happened and it may be on my record, you know. And surprisingly, it wasn't. So
They
I
had
can tell
never
you.
officially, it was not an official, it wasn't a crime, and he did not
Hmm.
officially arrest you either, so it couldn't be there.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
so did you go to the police station? Did I don't know where you report something like that? Did you report
Hmm.
this to
Yes.
the police?
Yes, I went to CRD either the same day or the next day because I myself I was quite scared as to what would happen next. And I did go to CRD. It was closed at the time, but there was a gentleman who saw me outside, and he stated he was in charge, and he listened, but he couldn't take the information because he claimed the office was closed. So I
They
did
normally
go to
close the
official.
police station. The police station was
Sorry.
closed. The
No,
police station was
CRD.
closed.
CRD was closed.
Yeah, but that's not the police
Right,
department.
exactly. They have working hours, and although I would have preferred to make the report anyway at another police station, he claimed it was not to be allowed. So it was still around August that I went into CRD to make the official report and asked for it to be investigated, asked for the officer to be investigated since he hadn't provided me with a clear explanation as to what triggered his actions.
Hmm.
Luckily, the officer at CRD who took my report in August, he allowed me to take a photo of it. So it's a two-page report that I have a photo of as evidence that the incident did occur. Because I feel like persons involved are trying to sweep it around under the rug would prefer that we all forget about it and just let it be. And it was a terrible experience. I mean, I can't imagine why persons would have caused that to happen. But either way, the officer did investigate from CRD, and I received a telephone call around, it could have been September or October of last year, from the officer who investigated it, the same one who took the report. And he said to me on the telephone that when he questioned the officer, who had essentially assaulted me in the ministerial complex. He said that officer essentially confessed that he had shown up to work at Central Police Station for his shift, and he found orders there from Office of the Prime Minister to remove me from the ministerial complex, and he simply carried out those orders as part of his duties. That was his
From
explanation.
you said from the office of the prime minister.
Yes, that is what the officer at CRD who investigated told me on the telephone when he called.
And was there a reason?
No, he gave me no reason. The other bit of detail that he provided was that when he questioned the staff at the ministerial complex as to why I was not allowed to be there, he told me it was because of a previous incident where I was disturbing in some way. And I did ask him what evidence he had and how he carried out his investigation. Because anyone who sits and decides to hallucinate and come up with an incident, that's not a very professional way to investigate. I think you have to ask for proof for everything. So I did
Yeah.
ask him, I told him, what proof do you have of an incident occurring where I seemingly caused the disturbance prior to that day at the ministerial complex. I can tell you for a fact that I have not set foot in that building since the last general elections until that day. So anybody who is trying to put across a narrative that an incident occurred needs to show how. We need to respect the people that we pay to do things. And I am very disgusted that this is how the RGPF carries out an investigation, to the point where they can try to convince me of an incident that did not occur. And I told the officer just that he needs to do his investigations properly. And in any case, I would like this nonsense in writing. Don't tell me this rubbish on the telephone. I'd like to circulate it, show whoever wants to see that here we have people, I don't know, mentally ill, creating incidents out of thin air, with no
But
evidence to show that it has happened. Or I don't know if I have a look-alike, or there are people imagining
that's
me,
what I was
or
just about. I was about to ask, could it be a case of mistaken identity?
well, I know I certainly asked for an explanation and I didn't get it. So I when I asked the officer for an official copy of his findings rather than just, telling me on the telephone, he informed me at that point that he was not authorized to do that, that there was a procedure, and it involved me making a request from the commissioner's office just to get a copy of the report. The same thing he was telling me on the telephone, just to have it recorded,
Writing.
whether a digital copy or a hard copy. Just for that, there was a procedure. He could only call and tell me on the phone where there was no record of what he said. This is rubbish, so I did go along with the procedure. I eventually went to the commissioner's office. I told them why I was there. They began by oh Lord. They began by giving me a form to fill out to make the request. While I was filling out the form, they told me to instead send an email. They gave me an email address. I did send an email to the commissioner's office with the report that I had made at CRD attached to it, that 2-page report, so that he had a paper trail of the incidents. I got no response. A couple weeks passed, so I then went in person to the commissioner's office. I went up, I spoke with his secretary. As far as I know, she's his secretary, Ms. Dominic. And at the time, she said to me that I think she was off for a bit on vacation or something, and that nobody else was checking the email. So I asked her to check the email right there and then, so that I would know whether I should resend it or not. I think she checked the email in my presence. She found it in the spam folder, and she said now that she's aware of it, she would look into it. She gave me a number that I should call to follow up. The number didn't work. And I ended up, maybe a couple weeks later, going back to the commissioner's office. This time when Ms. Dominic saw me, she told me to go downstairs. And I thought, why? She's aware of why I'm here. She's aware of my request. And here she is trying to ignore the matter, I guess. So I went downstairs, I waited. Eventually, another officer came up to me, started taking my information again, as if they had no idea why I was there or what I was talking about, essentially to restart the process of applying, I guess. She said she'd get back to me. I'm not sure how often this happened, but at some point, I got a phone call from her name is Stanislaus. She works downstairs in the commissioner's office in the downstairs section. She called me suddenly one morning and said, Deputy Commissioner Prince would like to meet with you today at a given time in the afternoon. And I said to her, for what reason? What's the purpose of this meeting? I was not aware that this is part of the procedure for me to access a copy of the report. It was simply me making the request, I think paying $20. And from all police stations that I've asked, every police officer, it's generally a 2-week process. This is what I've been told. For me, it has been over a year since I first requested. And then, there are these elaborate procedures like me needing to attend a meeting with Deputy Commissioner Prince. It's ridiculous. I told her I needed to know what the meeting was about, and I was not prepared to attend the meeting simply to get a copy of the report. I also told her that I had work obligations that day, and I was not planning to cancel them. So the meeting, if it needed to occur for whatever reason, should be rescheduled. The meeting was never rescheduled. I did call to follow up a few times, and she just kept telling me I needed to wait until he is available to see me, and that's that. Up to maybe a week or two ago, I called and I spoke to the same officer, Stanislaus, and she was rather rude. She said to me, "We called you in for a meeting with Deputy Commissioner Prince and you didn't attend, so I can't help you." And I'm questioning the protocols used by the RGPF now, because at that point, when the officer called me and said that this incident was triggered by orders from Office of the Prime Minister sent to Central Police Station, I went to CID. I went to CID and I asked for the officer in charge. And I spoke to him and I said to him, "Has anything changed since the last general elections in terms of how the country is being run? Are you no
Mm-hmm.
longer enforcing the laws of the land? Does the RGPF now operate on random commands from the office of the Prime Minister? Has there been a change?" And he
Mm-hmm.
assured me no. So I said, "Well, how do you explain this? The office of the Prime Minister commands an officer to harass me out of the ministerial complex. What next? Is this the purpose of the police in the state?"
And you were sitting by the Ministry of Agriculture, not the Prime Minister's ministry
No,
office.
exactly. I was on the third floor, right outside the office of the Director of Lands. And again, nobody has provided an explanation as to what is the offense. Everybody
And
has been rather
if
silent about it.
so as I was saying, if someone was is barred from going up at the ministerial complex,
Hmm.
the security downstairs should be informed. The security desk, whoever is on duty should be able to check and see. And but they sent you up, right? You follow
Exactly.
the
That is
procedure.
what I was telling the officer at that point. Like, his statement that I'm not allowed to be there is not even factual because I didn't break into the building. I was allowed.
Right, you have to sign in, don't you?
I did.
The last time I've been there, you have to sign in and all of
Hmm.
that, and then they check your purse and you go
Hmm.
up.
They
Right
did.
now, have you tried reaching the Prime Minister's ministry, the
I did
office?
at least twice because, again, I am not comfortable returning to the ministerial complex. It
Yeah.
was a very embarrassing situation for me. So I have called at least twice, and I spoke to two different persons. I called a few months ago, asking for an explanation. First of all, whether they will admit or deny that the incident was triggered by, I guess, a phone call from Office of the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
It was a young lady who I spoke with, and I did ask to speak to the current prime minister directly. I have nothing to hide, and
Mm-hmm.
I am not trying to pretend this didn't happen. As much as I think that it's petty and it is an embarrassment to the country that something like this has happened, I'm not trying to sweep it under the rug either. So I did call, I did ask to speak to the prime minister directly. I did ask for him to get back to me. It didn't happen. I called again as recently as maybe a week or two ago, and I spoke to a gentleman there. I can't remember his exact name, something like Anthony Bernard or something like that. But he took the information. He told me at the time the prime minister is out of the country, because I did ask to speak to the current prime minister directly too. And
Mm-hmm.
I asked for an explanation. I said, firstly, I'd like to confirm what the police said to me, that orders were sent from Office of the Prime Minister to Central Police Station to have me, I wouldn't even say escorted, I would say harassed out to the ministerial complex. Trust me, I was not going to leave there walking out nicely because I needed an explanation. I'm not aware that Grenada has turned communist to the point where an officer just comes and tells you you're not allowed in a certain part of the country. I'm sorry, when I was granted Grenadian citizenship as a child, I'm pretty sure it meant that I was allowed in every part of the country. And my previous
Right.
experience here, I've never had any such incidents occurring. I've never even had a person holding on to any part of my body relentlessly while I say, "Don't touch me." So, I mean, it's not a land of perverts. I've never had such an experience at a bar, at a party, at a nightclub, or any such thing. So, for it to happen in broad daylight in the ministerial complex. Here's an officer refusing to handcuff you, refusing to say what's the offense, who ordered him to harass me, etc. But instead just holding me by the arm, even after I say to him, don't touch me. This is like a whole new level of sickness in the country.
Yeah. Now, there are a whole bunch of reasons why any one person can go to visit the ministerial complex,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you've been barred from going there. Now, there's also like the immigration office. There's also a registry up there where you do like the births and death registry, I think. All of that is
Mm-hmm.
up there at the complex. So are you not allowed? Do you know if you're allowed to go to the immigration office for instance?
Well, I have asked. I have called the commissioner's office on several occasions just to gain some clarity, and nobody has cared to provide an explanation. It seems to be a very profound situation that is taking quite a while for them to be able to provide some feedback on. It's been over a year. I mean, I have waited. I have certainly waited for the commissioner's office to figure out how to answer the question. I understand a lot of new persons were appointed, and it may take them a while to understand how to get the job done. But I think this wait period is a bit ridiculous now. How long can it take for somebody to just provide an explanation? I am not even asking for an explanation. I am pretty sure that the information is there in the notebook at CRD. And I will not stoop to the level of going to CRD and tearing the page out of the notebook. The officers at CRD have been very understanding. They themselves are shocked that the commissioner's office is behaving so differently in this one situation. Every officer I've spoken to has said it's a 2-week process. The commissioner's office simply grants the permission for the information to be given to the person who made the report. And now here is this unique procedure created for me, to the point where I can call an officer, Stanislaus, can say to me, well, I can't help you. I mean, I didn't call for her help in any way. I think she needs to be taught how to do her job.
Listen, about a week ago, I was involved in a traffic confusion and nobody moving. So I was the second car behind on in one direction, and then there was a vehicle that caused the whole uproar, and the truck came and stopped behind that vehicle. I understood that the vehicle that started the issue is a policeman. He wasn't in police clothes, he was in civilian wear. And we there, everybody just there waiting. And eventually a police rode up on a motorcycle and he came straight to me and said to me to go back, to reverse. And it was a good little way and there was traffic on the side, a very narrow road. It was in the evening. So I said to him, why didn't you ask the persons on the other side? Because the two of us, the two vehicles, that was the one in front of me and my own, we had the okay. In other words, we were on the left. The obstruction to the traffic, the vehicle was on the right. So the policeman and the truck, they were in the wrong, really. He never went to them. He never spoke to them. He came directly to me and tell me to go back. So I asked him a couple of questions. I said, why didn't you, oh, he just came to me. Why didn't you go to the guy over the policeman? I said, I understand he's a policeman. He's the one that's causing the problem, the issue. And he told me,
Mm-hmm.
don't ask him no question. He said, I'm not allowed to ask him any question. I said, really? I'm not allowed to ask you questions? He said, no. And he said, if I did not obey, I can be arrested, right? Right away, he
Mm-hmm.
was ready to arrest me without even. So I don't understand the duties of the policeman anymore and what he can.
Anymore. That's the key word. Anymore. Yeah.
I don't understand. So before I get arrested, I tried my best and back up. It was a little bit complicated. There had some people trying to help me direct me back, and I had to swing in somebody's yard and all the drama. And then the other
Mm-hmm.
guy was as well. And then the policeman drove off with the truck. And then I have to come out of the yard and all of that just so I don't get arrested. And I was in the right. And I was not
Yeah.
allowed to ask questions. So I don't understand how we're being treated like that now. So I could
Mm-hmm.
understand how you felt just then. I felt so violated,
Yeah.
right? That's yeah. I'm going home from work, and I'm stuck in the road. They're trying to get home, and this is what happened. But it was one
Mm-hmm.
policeman. I guess the policeman himself might have called in and have somebody come out, and I don't know if it was official, but probably his buddy, and came
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, So I could really understand, but what are you going to do from here?
Well,
Because as
what
I said,
I have
there are a
done,
lot of you
what
might
I
want to do that would take you to the ministerial complex.
Well, exactly. So I have avoided that and every other government building. I mean, I even avoided going to the financial complex because the next
Yeah.
option was to access land from a private citizen in Granance, just to rent
Mm-hmm.
from somebody. And in order to see who owned whatever piece of land we may have been interested in, that would have required me to go to the section close to the financial complex that deals with that, where you can get that information. And again, I certainly asked, has there been a law passed in Parliament? Is there some kind of blacklist of people who, I don't know, are public enemies or whatnot? I have asked for an explanation. If somebody woke up one day and thought we were stuck in communist times, or back in the day of Gary and whoever, they should say. Or I don't know if we have some mentally ill people who are not aware of what century we live in and that this is a democratic country. How profound is it to run a country, and how profound is the concept of democracy? Is what I find very amazing.
And couldn't they have somebody in the ministry, somebody from the prime minister's office, come down and
Exactly.
speak to you before they call in a policeman to remove you?
Yes, exactly. I really was not armed and dangerous in any way. If I was, I would have tried to defend myself, but I had no means of. So that is how I end up leaving the building. I must say that, yeah, I have avoided every government building since, but I was able to speak with members of the opposition in government, and I did confirm with them that there is no blacklist. Nothing was passed in Parliament to officially prevent anyone, especially me, from being in a government building in the ministerial complex. There is nothing on record to explain this, all right? And the only
Have you
people,
got a lawyer? Have you
well,
spoken to legal advice?
I wanted to go the route of getting an explanation from the commissioner's office. At this point, I've concluded that they are deliberately being inefficient. I tried to get to speak with the commissioner himself. I do not know the gentleman. I have been told his name. And I have asked several police officers. I have called 911. I have called the commissioner's office. I have gone to other police stations. I have asked them, can you give me this gentleman's home number? He must live somewhere in Grenada. Because whenever I call the commissioner's office and I ask to speak to him directly, just to understand whether he is aware of this and he is sanctioning the cover up, or whether it has not been brought to his attention. I just need to know who is working and who is not working. Is he sanctioning the cover up, or has it been kept from him? No
Hmm.
one would pass on my call. The secretary refuses to let me speak to the commissioner. He's never there. He's never able to return the call. So I have resorted to asking for the gentleman's address. I figure he must reside somewhere in the States, and I,
That
I am
that
not going.
that's legal. They wouldn't give you his address.
Yeah, and that is what they say. Although I explained the circumstances and I have asked them, what do you think I should do at this point? Should I do you honestly think I should have to come to CRD with a gun and tell them, give me a copy of the report? I mean, come on, let's be proper here. What I have done recently, a few weeks ago, because of the job that I do, I was required to go, not luckily not in the ministerial complex, but in the vicinity of the botanical gardens, to a small restaurant nearby. And I remember the first time I was required to do so, I simply put that this is a dangerous area in Grenada. I'm sorry, this is the most I have experienced in terms of being violated as a person. You know, it happened there in the ministerial complex. I've never experienced anything close to this anywhere else in Grenada in my entire life in this country. So I informed the company this is a very dangerous part of Grenada, the government building area. The second time around, I because again, a colleague thought it was a bit of an embarrassment to the country for a business, essentially a multinational corporation, to have this impression of the country, specifically the government offices in the country and where they're located. I tried again. I contacted Central Police Station and I let them know that there was this incident in July of last year, and that I have not been given any information as to where I can freely walk without being suddenly approached by an officer telling me for no good reason I am not allowed to be there with no explanation. I don't want a reoccurrence of this. So I contacted Central Police Station and I said, what should I do? I do not want to show up in that area and have a repeat of the incident. I am not going to go prepared to fight off a police officer. I asked them to have a police officer escort me just in case another police officer showed up with orders from Officer the Prime Minister to get my attention, I guess.
Yeah.
I explained the situation to a female officer at Central Police Station over the phone, though. Firstly, she was not aware of the incident from last year, so she claimed. Secondly, she said if I needed police protection, I needed to pay for it. You know, that I mean, I explained the incident to her quite clearly, and I let her know that the commissioner's office has not provided an explanation. Office of the Prime Minister has not provided an explanation. I have given them every opportunity to, without becoming confrontational, and show up there in person. I have called on the telephone. You know, I'm not trying
Yeah.
to get in any type of ugly situation with anybody, and I have not been given an explanation. So I said to her, should a police not escort me in case another officer comes to diligently remove me from anywhere? She had the nerve to tell me that I needed to pay an off duty police officer for such services. So it seems that our taxpayers' dollars can be used to pay officers as part of their jobs to physically assault me, harass me, right? But not provide protection. It's like the mandates of the RGPF has been reversed. You know, in practice, there are people who would not like to admit that, but in practice, this is what I see. Um, then she said to me, it's a Saturday. I informed the lady. I said to her, listen, at this point, I have put that area in Grenada in the same category as the red zones of Haiti, you know, for the purpose of business, you know, because while the majority of citizens may be safe in that part of Grenada, I am not. And I am speaking on my own behalf that in my experience, that is the highest level of danger I have ever had to deal with. I've gone to Montu, River Road, every back
Yeah.
road in every rural area, lonely country roads, dealt with intoxicated people at shops. I've never had anybody try to harm me, but here is an officer on
Yeah.
the job in a government building. Mhm. So
It's something to take a look at.
from
We
my
have to pay
experience,
because, like the senator Leclerc, when he was fired, he calmly got up from the cabinet and walked out without no confrontation with anybody. He thanked them. He thanked the prime minister for hiring him as a senator and a minister, and wished them well, the cabinet well, and he walked out. And he was still escorted out on the way out by a policeman, or a very high-ranked policeman, and the head of securities up there at the prime minister's office. So, and he was escorted right out to his car. So I'm not sure what is going on there. I know you dabbled in politics a little bit. Did you say anything
maybe I
derogatory
over
about about the prime minister? I don't know. I mean, what could have
Well,
caused that?
on that note, yeah, I got into politics in 2017. I was a candidate for a small party in the 2018 election. I ran for St. George Southeast. I didn't make too much of an impact because I had an injury. I broke my leg in January of the same year, and elections was March. So Following that, I rebranded a few times. The last time I did anything official in terms of engaging the media, it was in the capacity of public relations officer of the Progress Party, and at the time, I was negotiating with both TGM and NDC for a proposed merger. That was the last official engagement I had with the NDC. Was a few video meetings with the leadership at the time to discuss a negotiation. And I remember saying to them, these senior gentlemen, that I will be on the news talking about the Progress Party because I felt like they were stalling negotiations, trying to, there's this backstabbing culture in this organization, and I dare them to say otherwise. And I did just that. And they stopped speaking to me. They really did stop speaking to me. So when the current prime minister took over as the party leader, members of the Progress Party were wondering if to lend their support. I didn't care to lend my support, but other members were. And I was the only person who had known him prior to that. They just saw a name and a face in the newspapers. So I met him when I worked at the school that his children attended in 20 between late 2016 and early 2017. I worked at the school and I met him in that capacity as a parent. I had not seen him since until he appeared in the newspaper as the prospective leader for the NDC. So, because members of the Progress Party were wondering if to lend their support, I myself had a few concerns as to, his intentions, his credibility, his professional character. So I contacted him directly. I got his cell phone number from a mutual colleague and I called him directly. I didn't go through NDC channels. I spoke with him. I welcomed him to Frontline Politics. I informed him that I was not going to be in his way for that elections. I was stepping aside, and I did tell him he had the support of former members of the Progress Party. And at that point, we did agree to a meeting, a video meeting, and I told him to pick a day and time, and he agreed to, and he never did, and I left it at that, and we never spoke again. Never had reason to. But
Well, I see no reason there to buy you from the ministerial complex.
yeah, and also to not explain too, we need to take our professional responsibility seriously, which is why I try to inquire through the appropriate channels because everybody
It
is
is a
collecting a salary to do a job. So I
it is a
channeled my request through CRD because at the time, all I know is that an officer is behaving inappropriately. When I got the
yeah.
information that it's from Office of the Prime Minister, I asked for proof, pretty much a copy. And that is why I contacted Office of the Prime Minister. Office of the Prime
Mm.
Minister had every opportunity to admit or deny. Let's see where the miscommunication is, what is factual, what is not. And the silence is what I have a problem with, the silence, because people are being paid to do things. And then the result of that is I have had to work around it to the point where I am not taking the blame for this. Nobody has explained to me why this happened to me. And so I took every measure necessary to protect myself. When I go to job interviews, I let them know I had this experience and that I would prefer not to be targeted. And if the prime minister or whoever from his office ordered them to harm me, would they? I've had to have that conversation with every employer and prospective employer. Are they likely to try to harm me if the office of the prime minister tells them to? But again, the embarrassment to the country is that my story is that is essentially a red zone in Grenada. I'm sorry, I've asked enough questions. I've asked many times for an explanation, and I will protect myself by avoiding that area. I guess until next elections, hopefully we have a change in government, and I'm no longer a threat to the functioning of the ministerial complex, whatever
Well,
threat I was perceived to be at the time.
Rosemary, I empathize with you. I mean, I would not like that to happen to me, and I probably would deal with it different to you. But um, we are here, and any updates you have, and you would like to come back and talk to us about it. But I would keep at it because, as I say, there are a lot of things you would need probably need, especially depending on your job, your profession at the time, to go up to the
Mm-hmm.
ministerial complex, and they can't tell you're not allowed in the ministerial complex. You, as you say, you're allowed freedom of movement, or constitution
Mm-hmm.
allow us freedom of movement. So I just think it's very sad, and the fact that you have not gotten any explanation
Right.
as to why, because I am
Mm-hmm.
thinking it must be mistaken identity. So that's only how you could find that out. And if you say they're saying you were disruptive at some point in the ministerial complex, I don't think this being disruptive is enough to bar you from going up there.
But
If you
the thing
have
is,
a
it
weapon,
didn't happen because I was not there at any
right?
point
But
until that
no,
day.
I'm saying, what is being disruptive though? If so even if there's somebody was disruptive, I'm not even talking about you personally, but what they mean by disruptive. And if somebody
Mm-hmm.
you barred from going up in a public place as a ministerial complex, you didn't swing a weapon or anything, they
Right.
just say disruptive. So I
Yeah,
mean, come
and
on,
then
this
to
is
be
where
told you're not allowed in the pavement areas if there are restricted
exactly.
areas
Not even
now,
outside.
you know?
Rain. If the rain is falling, you had to go out in the street and stand up in the rain because you can't stand on the pavement. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it
And the
is an
violence.
international embarrassment to Grenada that this is what the country has come to. You know, I
Yeah,
think we had a
I mean,
lot going for us.
I personally am dealing with having drones in my space in the evening now, right? Up to last night, they were there. They had stopped for a couple of days. This thing is going on for almost 2 weeks now, and then they started back. So I can't, if I don't want to be seen by people who operate in a drone, I can't go use my patio in the evening. They're there hovering over there,
It's like a
and
total
so
violation of privacy.
right. So this is where we are today. So I want to
Hmm.
thank you for coming on and sharing your story. As I said, um, we would like to get some follow up as to what's going on. If you decide to take it to keep at it, and I would have gotten a lawyer to write a letter to the prime minister's
Well,
office. I'm sorry.
I thought of addressing it at the CARICOM level
It,
because I am a Guyanese citizen, and
it's
I
for no, just for comfort, just so you can know to see if they would answer really as to what it is and clear it up so that you
mhm.
might be able to go back to the ministerial complex. You know what I mean?
Well, if for some reason I do have to go, like the day when I felt I needed to be nearby, I did contact the police. And if there's anything urgent that requires me to be there, I'm still trying to speak to the commissioner directly. I mean, it's just that I didn't get around to looking up his phone number in the directory or something. But you know, there was
Or
a time in the past.
they have some
Yeah, there
deputy
was a
commissioner.
time. Yeah, I did want to speak to him to know whether or not he was aware, or whether he was, and he was sanctioning the cover up. You know, I'd like to see
Yeah,
who takes their job seriously and who doesn't, because at the end of the day, we need functional bodies. We need a functional police force. We need a functional government. We need functional government
Dep-
ministries. You know,
deputy
and there is
commissioner
work to be done
calling
in the country.
have a lot of
Yeah,
clout.
yeah,
Deputy
there's
commissioner
work to be
calling.
done in the country, and people who sit in the ministerial complex, their job description is not to identify terrorists, you know, based on their own criteria of deciding a
Oh,
person is a threat. You know, that's not their job description. There's a whole lot of work to be done in the country, and they should be working, not finding ways to prevent others from being productive.
okay, so it was nice meeting you on here. I've heard of you, never met you, never even seen you before. So it was nice meeting you, and I do hope that this thing get sorted out in soonest time.
Hmm.
Best
I hope
wishes,
so.
and
You know, I didn't want it to get to the point where, you know, it's an embarrassment to the country, but I feel like I've given persons enough opportunity to explain, you know, to do the right thing, to respect themselves as professionals. And it hasn't happened. So at the end of the day, we do need to call out those who are misguided, and
yeah,
maybe a public embarrassment will caused
It's
them to
15
awaken.
months. It's 15 months now since it happened, a year and 3 months.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Best wishes, my dear. Good to see you.
All right. All right. Thank you so much once again for having me on. Okay.
Most
Bye
welcome.
bye.
Folks, we'll take a break and come right back. Thank you for tuning in to Simon Says. To ensure that you never miss an episode, click subscribe and make sure to turn on the notifications by clicking on the notification bell icon. See you at the next episode. Welcome back. Welcome back. In recent times, there have been lots of movement when it comes to Grenada, oil, and gas. Won't you say? Right? For a state which only a year ago, the government, through the Governor General, in her throne speech, announced that there was a no show when it came to Grenada oil and gas, no documents, no sign of oil and gas. That's just a year ago, 2023, August, when the Governor General delivered the throne speech. Here is the Governor General as she delivered her throne speech.
As of today, we are yet to solve the mystery of Grenada's offshore oil and gas reserves. Very little records can be found anywhere within the government, and our technocrats within the ministries and departments have very little information on this matter. This situation is untenable and completely unacceptable, and my government is committed to doing all within its power to unearth the mystery of Grenada's oil and gas status. To this end, my government has established a technical working group chaired by a past Minister for Finance, Mr. Nazim Burke, and comprised of distinguished Grenadians, including Mr. Rodney George, Mr. Richard Duncan, Mr. Raymond Nurse, and the Office of the Attorney General, represented by the Solicitor General, to investigate and to do what it takes to demystify our oil and gas situation.
Okay. Now, this further led to the reiteration and the concretizing of what the NDC believed, that there was no oil and gas, and that the former Prime Minister, in his final rally up there at Perth Runway, and that was the 2018 elections, announcing that there might be oil and gas in our waters, and that it was a hoax and or an election gimmick. This is the Prime Minister.
Sisters and brothers, the report said that we have found significant gas and oil in the waters of Grenada in one well so far. Brothers, one well. We have several more wells which are even more exciting than the one they just found.
So that was the Prime Minister announcing. I mean, most of us should remember that. That was a big deal, you know. We did hear from the Governor General that a committee was set up to investigate the reason why there was no semblance of documents to show in any of the ministries that there was something happening with the oil and gas that was in Grenada waters. No documents. The chairman of the committee, V. Nazim Burke, former Minister of Finance and Energy, during the 2008 to 2013 reign of the NDC, who had his own team put together to explore our options. They went to Trinidad and met with oil companies there to discuss the findings or the drilling, right? So there was something going on, even with the former NDC government of 2008 to 2013. The NDC, however, inherited some legal troubles from the former administration with the GPG and Greinberg situation. The former administration started off engaging Greinberg. I am not clear as to what caused the switch from Greinberg to Global Petroleum Group, the GPG group. And so the Greinberg took them to court. The NDC, however, when they came in 2008, they refused to honor that court case. In other words, they said they were not going to spend money. And Greinberg had sued the people, the government and people of Grenada, and the Minister of Energy separately, who was then Minister Gregory Boyne. The NDC coming into office refused to support the case, and so the Global Petroleum Group were the ones who paid for the court case between Greinberg and the people of Grenada and the former Minister of Energy, Mr. Gregory Boyne. So Mr. Boyne and the government and people of Grenada won the case against Greinberg. GPG at the time was given exploration license, which is valid for 5 years, after which it's expired. And if they want to continue, then they would have to reapply. And they don't have to get back an exploration license. In other words, the government could give it to someone else, could ignore them, whatever. But the exploration license lasts for 5 years. It was said that the NDC administration at that time, they were dragging their feet and not engaging GPG with the hope that the 5 years would come and expire, and they would use that to get rid of GPG. However, the government collapsed before that, the NDC of 2008 to 13. And so the time that they were out of office, they lost the elections. That was 15-0, the second 15-0 the NDC got. They lost that election, and so GPG was still there. Then GPG got, they had gotten that exploration license in 2008, but by 2013, when NDC was out of office, they still had some time there. In 2013, the NNP was back in office, of course, and they gave development license to GPG, the Global Petroleum Group. We know that there was some type of drilling taking place out there in the waters. I mean, people saw the badge, I think they're called badges out there in the water, and questions was asked, and we were told that there was some seismic investigation taking place out there in the waters. Now, the development license is for 20 years. And so the government of Grenada is more or less, for want of a better word, tied to GPG for 20 years, right? The license is to develop that block where the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, spoke of in Pearls, that they saw something there, right? Of course, there was COVID-19, the pandemic, that started in, you could say 2018, went to 19, 2020, 2021. Even, well, for some countries, 2022, the COVID was still happening, because you couldn't travel to the US in 2022 if you didn't have if you wasn't vaccinated. and you're not a citizen. You couldn't enter. So a little bit overlapping into 2022. And so that was put on halt or slowed down tremendously, the whole oil exploration deal. And the communication, there was a sort of breakdown in communication there between GPG and the NNP. And then there was the 2022 general elections, and the NNP lost to the NDC. Information reaching me from the inside, up there, up in the inside. You know, I laugh because I know they would be hunting the workers to find out who gave me the information. They go with computers and all sorts of stuff and have them sign all kind of clauses, separate from the public service clause that they would have signed, that they signed coming in to as a public servant. In June of 2022, the same month, the NDC came into office. The GPG tried contacting the relative minister or ministry, but was advised to speak directly to the prime minister by someone in that ministry because they didn't think the minister, the new minister, was there yet to discuss that type of business. And so they were advised to speak directly to the prime minister. However, the GPG tried and was ignored, for want of a better word, was ignored. So when Prime Minister Deacon and his government and the Governor General, Cecile La Grenade, in the 2023 throne speech announced that there was no document and they had no information on the oil and gas situation, it was because he didn't want any information, because he could have. GPG, who had the documents because they were already, if you want to say, partnering with the government of Grenada, they had the development license, begged to speak, to meet and discuss where they are with the oil and gas exploration. They were ignored, right? It was definitely because the Prime Minister refused to meet with GPG. In other words, he lied. And the former Prime Minister, now opposition leader, Dr. Keith Mitchell, called him out on it up there at the Parliament building after that particular throne speech was read. And here is what Dr. Mitchell had to say.
This government is being characterized by telling lies, which are obviously blatant. And you know many of them we have spoken about. The lie about oil and gas, that they have no documentation. It's a blatant lie. Enough documentation, how do you mean? That's years of that. Don't forget, the government that came into office, NDC, before this one, and would have followed up on a number of activities. So it's a very strange, I'm saying it's a blatant lie.
Compliments, Carib update. Now, here is Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, all cocky and self-serving in response.
Minister Bowen was Minister for Energy for a long time. If they know where the files are, then they can certainly, in the public interest, direct the technocrats at the public, at the various ministries where the files can be obtained, so that they can provide the files to us. I'll challenge the opposition leader. If he says he knows where the file is, ask him if his colleague ministers know where the files are. Right? If they know where the files are, then either them or him can publicly indicate where the files are, where they've been stored, and how the files can be accessed, and indicate that to the public servants so that they can tell us. So when I say to you, we have written transition reports from every ministry. Oil and gas was not mentioned in a single report.
Now, GPG tried corresponding with the Deacon Mitchell-led administration in excess of a dozen times, and eventually, sometime at the end of 2023, the last quarter of 2023, decided to stop and meet with them, with GPG. The Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell, met with GPG briefly and then passed them on to his investigating committee, headed by V. Nazim Burke. The other members, Richard Duncan, Rodney George, Raymond Nurse, Dr. Raymond Nurse, and the AG office, I think the Solicitor General in the person on that committee. The committee wanted to know a lot of things, everything, and they're entitled to all sorts of information from GPG, and the GPG cooperated for the most part. They asked for the treaty mapping about the oil, and the GPG stated that the file was very huge, and if they would like to have it reproduced, then they would have to pay for it. That's the only thing from my investigation that came up, that GPG did not say, well, okay, yes, we're going to give it to you, and here it is. They said they would give it to them, but they asked that they reproduce it and pay for it because it was a huge file. I'm not sure how much it would cost, but it would have cost, but they wanted the government to do it. GPG never heard from the government of Grenada again. The Attorney General, as I understand it, was very rude at some point to GPG when GPG asked about the ministry related to the petroleum, where the laws stated that there should be such a ministry. So under the Ministry of Energy, there should be some Ministry of Petroleum, a junior ministry, some petroleum ministry. And they asked about that ministry and who was the minister related. And they were told they're not to be told how to run their government and their ministries by the Attorney General. This is a clip here of the Honorable Deacon Mitchell, Prime Minister Mitchell, when the first time mentioning the GPG to the Grenadian people.
Right, thank you. So the oil and gas technical working group that has been appointed has been feverishly at work. As you'd appreciate, one of the challenges we faced was ensuring that we were satisfied that we had all of the documentation pertaining to this issue. And their work, therefore, has been ongoing. They have retained a legal consultant. They've also retained some technical consultants. And we have sought in recent times to engage with GPG. So there's been some exchanges of correspondence with them. We expect that in the coming months, we will look to sit with them and get a clear understanding of their understanding of the current contractual obligations that they have to us and all contractual obligations that we have to them. I want to point to that GPG would have been awarded certain blocks, but there are other blocks within our territorial space that we need to also look at. But in order to do so, we need to make sure that we put the right legislative policy and financial regulations in place so that Grenadians can benefit, if at all, are there any hydrocarbon deposits of a commercial and exploitable nature within our waters.
Now, this press conference was held over just about a week ago after the Prime Minister returned from Nigeria, a couple of days after he returned from Nigeria. The statement is as a result of a question asked at the press conference because of a news release from Lagos, Nigeria, on what started off as being a secret rendezvous of Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell with African billionaire Aliko Dangote. Now, so there was this news item in print media speaking to our Prime Minister being in Nigeria. Remember, he left to go to Rwanda. And that was cancelled in midair, and then we heard nothing. We knew nothing. It was taken off the GIS Facebook page and the Prime Minister's Facebook page, and we knew nothing of where our Prime Minister was until that article came up, and it got to Grenada, of course, the wide web, and the next day, a statement was released as to our Prime Minister being in Nigeria. Here is a clip of Dangote. This is the richest man in Africa, right? On Grenada, having crude oil, and he's discussing, have discussed with our Prime Minister about crude, and we would receive petroleum in return. Here is Dangote.
For the Dangote Group, the visit provides an opportunity for business expansion and possibility of buying crude from Grenada.
We're looking at petroleum, to buy maybe some crude from them.
So there's Dangote there. The news said they're thinking of buying crude from Grenada. Now, most Grenadians found it a little bit interesting. Others were surprised, shocked, whatever description, adjective you want to use. And understandably so, because we knew nothing about crude in Grenada. We also never knew what the committee that was put to investigate these documents, or whether, if there were documents, and if there are documents, where they are, and why they're not in any ministry, and that there were no semblance of anything to do with oil and gas at the ministerial complex. We never heard anything about it till we had the Prime Minister a week ago speaking about GPG, and a few days before that, speaking, well, not him, but Dangote, speaking about crude, about wanting to get crude from Grenada. We were all astonished at the news that Grenada had crude and was going to do business with Dangote, as he spoke of his meeting with the Grenadian Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell. The whole thing surrounding the Prime Minister's trip to Nigeria, an obvious secret kept from the nation, the gift of the plane ride from the UK to Nigeria, a gift from Dangote, and to the Prime Minister, I guess it's okay to take gift from Dangote. We spoke about it. As a matter of fact, NDC still does speak about the briefcase. They still speak about the briefcase incident with Prime Minister Mitchell collecting monies in Europe and saying is his damn money, right? So he was, as he said, reimbursed for the trip he made. Prime Minister was not reimbursed, but he was given a free trip, right? It's 6 of one and half a dozen of the next. So, but we hear, according to them young people, crickets where that is concerned. Nobody thought it they were. Nobody supporting the NDC. Nobody with their head in the sand spoke about it, because they know what's going on up here, you know. The majority of them have their head in the sand and they have no clue what's happening above that, right? So he got a plane ride from the UK, where he canceled his Rwanda trip, to Nigeria, together with his kids, his colleague, Teddy St. Louis, his colleague and friend, Teddy St. Louis, and his now Chief of Staff. We still would like to know from the Prime Minister, when was Mr. St. Louis appointed Chief of Staff? And the casual way he told us, he just like, because the media personnel asked about Teddy St. Louis and what capacity was he on that trip. Oh, he's in the room here and he is our chief of staff. When did it happen? Before you left? In midair? When the story bus with all you being in Nigeria, in the news there? On your way back, when you thought, okay, well, we have to have an explanation for the people as to why you was on the trip, posing with Dangote and your executive secretary with me. So we had to come up with something. So let's give you the press secretary job. I mean, we need to know, right? Because you all were busted. You all was busted and had to come up with a plan, right? From the very beginning of him resigning as chief magistrate, was it the plan? Was it the plan to give him chief of staff or some, maybe ambassador? We have a lot of them, special envoys around. What is it? And when did it happen? If you look there, you'd see him posing with the Prime Minister and Mr. Dangote and the Prime Minister's Executive Secretary, Miss Leslie, Akira Leslie, I think it's her first name. There she is. She travels with the Prime Minister everywhere. The conversation throughout the trial and state for the next few days after the news broke, and even now, surrounding the crude. And the question is, we have crude? Everybody asking the other person, we have crude? Because nobody knew we had crude. You see, the last thing we know was, as you heard in the throne speech, the announcement that there was nothing to show, nothing found that indicated there was any sort of oil and gas, any sort of exploration taking place in Grenada. And that was to go against the fact that the Prime Minister then, and the now leader of the opposition, announced in 2018 at that rally in Pearls that there was oil and gas. And that was in one drill, in one well, and there are more wells, and it could be more oil as well. A committee was formed to investigate, as we all know, and that was it. We heard nothing from the committee. I myself had asked in my question and answer segment several times, where are we with the investigation with the oil, to do with the oil and gas? We heard nothing from the Prime Minister and his government, nothing from the committee, except a few days ago. No one came back to tell us that they found the documents. I hear the Prime Minister talking about they have all the documents they need. Where did they find it? By the side of the road somewhere? Down by Reno in the drain? Where they found the documents? Please tell us. In the floating in the carronage? But they seem to have all the documents they need, and there was in fact something to explore. So the Prime Minister, in a rage, went on to the Good Morning Grenada program on the GBN through the Tourism Authority and everyone else under what I would call a stone roller. I don't know if these things still exist. I know as a child growing up, you know, when we have one we call the tractor, and there's this one with the big wheel that they call the stone roller, used to level the asphalt. And so in the road, we call it the stone roller. That had to be a stone roller. True, that's not a bus. The way he pelt the authority, it had to be under a stone roller and crush them, the Tourism Authority, not just under a bus, right? Here is what he had to say on that program.
It is my job to be the chief advocate
for the beautiful tri-island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And the only way to do that is to leverage me and the office of the Prime Minister to ensure that we can get investors, we can get people interested and talking about Grenada. So with all due respect to the Grenada Tourism Authority and all the advertising, I am the biggest seller of Grenada. So when I go to Nigeria, I'm representing Grenada. Nigerians who never heard of Grenada would have heard of me.
Well, I would say the Prime Minister is not doing a very good job of selling Grenada. We have not heard of anything really tangible that the Prime Minister has done, well, selling Grenada to the rest of the world. We've heard the Tourism Authority and what they have done for overnight stay, for cruise ship. Guess what we just have? Where's the Minister of Foreign Affairs? Well, I guess he has not done anything either. And the many ambassadors and consul generals that we have out there, some of whom are collecting salaries bigger than the Prime Minister. But I guess the Prime Minister, that's peanuts for him. So he ain't worried about that. He ain't worried about that. Bigger fish to fry, right? Folks, it is amazing. The things, some of which I cannot even speak about on air, that I am privy to. And I'm telling you this. I can't, I won't. I cannot speak to it on air. Some of it I'm fair for my life. That's why I wouldn't speak about it on air. You understand? But it is not normal, some of the things that are going on behind the scenes. And some of it is not really behind the scenes, you know. It's there in our faces. It's there in our faces. Right? And there was, on Saturday morning, that's Saturday the 26th, 2024, we woke up to an article, and we're going to put it up on the screen. But it's been, I think that was one of the quickest one to move around. I've been getting it days. I'm still getting it. People said, I'm sure I have that about 20 times. That article being sent to me from home and abroad. And there's an article, this article, and let me put on my glasses. It's from The Punch, a newspaper, and I'm guessing it's a Nigerian newspaper. And it says here, most widely read newspaper. Nigerian oil firm secures $1 million deal in Grenada. And it's dated the 27th of October, 2024, right? Grenada is set to become a major energy hub as Nigerian oil and gas company Ocean Gate Oil and Gas Engineering has secured a historic multi-billion-dollar deal with Global Petroleum Group, that's GPG, to launch one of the Caribbean's largest oil and gas ventures. A statement by the group CEO, Dr. Aisha Akim Ugu. No, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. It says Achim, I would say Achimugu. Aisha Achimugu, made available to Punch online on Saturday, stated that this transformative partnership aims to develop Grenada's significant hydrocarbon reserves, paving the way for the island's nation to emerge as a major energy hub in the Caribbean and beyond. Achimugu said, "We are thrilled to enter this partnership with Global Petroleum Group, which will bring substantial economic benefits and energy resources to Grenada. This venture underscores OceanGate's commitment to investing in sustainable energy solutions that drive economic prosperity while respecting environmental standards. We believe this project will lay the foundation for future economic collaborations between Africa and the Caribbean. Now, and there are more, but I can stop there. Then, as I said, dated the 27th of October, 2024. Now, lest we forget, Dr. Aisha is the individual who spent and celebrated her birthday, her 50th birthday, here in Grenada in January, on the 22nd of January, 2024. That was her birthday. And she spent 7 days surrounded that time, included the actual birth date, right? She used the Silver Sands Beach Resort and the Calavini Island to celebrate her birthday. And the controversy surrounding the event. Remember the runaway Lagos state governor who showed up in Grenada for the party and did not alert his state that he was going to Grenada to a birthday party. Now, as the article said, OceanGate Oil, excuse me, OceanGate Oil and Gas Engineering has secured a multi-billion-dollar deal with Global Petroleum Group to launch an oil and gas venture. Now, Global Petroleum Group, GPG, has an exploration license and a development license now, meaning they can explore the entire area. GPG needed to raise over 300 million US dollars to mount their exploration campaign. They therefore was seeking partnership. Their drilling equipment came from the USA. Just to let you know that this thing has been happening for a while, and we only now finding out from our government that they just started to talk to GPG, right? The drilling equipment came from the USA. They've landed here. I've already started. But the Prime Minister said he had no information or documentation on, well, GPG and any oil exploration or anything to do with oil and gas here in Grenada. Although GPG had tried several times, as I said before, to meet with the Prime Minister and his administration to continue the conversation. Now, this agreement between Dr. Aisha's company and GPG, as I understand it, has nothing to do with the government of Grenada. Now, GPG is connected to Grenada. The agreement between Dr. Aisha and GPG has nothing, as I understand it, to do, and I can't say where who my source is, but I trust and believe in the information given to me. Dr. Aisha and her company, the OceanGate Oil and Gas Engineering, was talking to GPG long before Prime Minister Deegan went to Nigeria. And even though he was a guest at the Calavini Islands birthday party, he went to Nigeria and did not contact Dr. Aisha. And as I heard from my own ears, from a member of Dr. Aisha's party, he met richer friends. So the saying, make new friends, keep the old, air matter to our dear Prime Minister, our beloved Prime Minister, so to speak. Now, while the Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell, is offering Dangote crude, which, as I understand it, has no position, has no real authority in doing so at this point. It goes against the GPG agreement, as far as I understand it. Was singing of exploration and speaking of crude. This agreement was being signed off on. And if you look on the screen, you see the two parties that signed off on the agreement, the GPG and the Ocean Gate party of Dr. Aisha there, just sign as they sign off on their $1 billion agreement. Now that whole saga there remind me of the Samosa agreement. While the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs telling us nothing was signed, the document was being signed at the same time. But are we surprised? This is what we get from the NDC, wrong pegs in square holes, and the horse always already down the street galloping when they decide they're closing the stable. It's a sort of a upside down thing, a sort of whooping that we can't seem to shake off our shoulders. We're going down to the wire with it, a bunch of incompetent and inept leaders, our executive, that is, our executive in the cabinet of Grenada. What we know that we're going to get what we do under this development license is royalties. Grenada is we're going to get our royalties. We're not an investor. I mean, if we had the money, the 300 million USD, then I think we could have invested with GPG, but we don't have that kind of money, do we now? Right? So you've ignored the GPG, and so you've been offering crude whilst GPG signing with another company right there in Nigeria, another Nigerian company, and the whole Russian Nigerian thing, it's becoming a little bit shady and something that we have to keep looking at. Our hospital and the Mount Sinai thing. I have been doing my investigation. I'm not quite there yet, but somehow along the line, Nigeria is also involved. So it's something we have to pay attention to in the near future. But the whole thing, again, is just totally embarrassing for us as a people, to our country. We yet to hear anything from the Prime Minister, because he's the only one speaking on Dr. Aisha's agreement with GPG, and we await that to hear what our administration have to say on that. But the Prime Minister, really, because he's the only one speaking, he's the only one going from media house to media house, speaking, answering questions. If there's a press conference, he's the only one speaking and he's the only one answering, no matter who else is sitting at the table as ministers with him. He speaks for every ministry, for every minister. He answers for every ministry and every minister. He gets all the donations from the Chinese, from Dangote, 1,000 cricket kits for St. David's. He got 5 playing fields donated by the Chinese for St. David's. We have the Big Four, St. Andrew, find a central place, and oh God, give them one, give them a playing field. Put one in St. Patrick, distribute it throughout. But if you members of cabinet and the MPs and leads who would take part in the next election, not seeing what is happening, then it ain't worth telling all you either. Just go down the road as a bunch of blindfolded people, you know, and not pay attention to what is happening right there in front of you, right there in front of you. I might tell y'all one day, I might, but open your eyes. Open your eyes. Take out the mask, take out the wool over your eyes. Take the wool out of your eyes, you know, and pay attention. Folks, I want to ask the Prime Minister where he's at with the investigation on the lottery. It's getting worse as the workers are very worried about their entity. And so where are you with the investigation? Why is the chairman of the board and his lover still collecting paychecks and other checks from the Grenada Lottery Authority? Why? Why? Are we turning a blind eye to enrich our friends? Is that what it is? Where are you with the investigation, or if there is one at all, on the corrupt member of cabinet, your Minister of MIT, Andy Williams, who is collecting monies, shake hand monies, in exchange for contract? Where are you with that investigation? Is there any truth to that? I know it's true, but can you defend that? Where are you with the investigation back to the lotto on the rent collected? Or is the rent now going to the lottery authority instead of the law firm in St. Andrew, allegedly so? But we ask that allegation is being cleared and that it's not left out there hanging. What took place on the True Blue road work? What took place there with the young man who lost his life? Who gave the authority? Who authorized the release of the impounded vehicle that subsequently killed the young man? Still uninsured and unlicensed when the accident happened or the incident happened. Is there an investigation, an ongoing investigation going on there? I would like to let you know, my followers, my friends, my family, Simon Says family, know that the drones are back. And I should have some information for you from the police. I'm going to, in my next episode. I was told that they have a response for me, and I'm going to collect such. Folks, this is a wrap on today's episode of Simon Says. It's always a pleasure conversing with you and keeping them honest. Thank you for joining us again for yet another episode of Simon Says, where facts come first. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye now. Thank you for tuning in to Simon Says. To ensure that you never miss an episode, click subscribe and make sure to turn on the notifications by clicking on the notification bell icon. See you at the next episode.